All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to you to the My Chicago River Day Summer Challenge presentation on climate change. Hope everybody is doing well on this rainy Saturday morning, and thank you for joining us. Just a few housewarming things. If you have any comments, go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat box, and either Tim or I will respond to them, hopefully in real time. And if you have a question, we certainly will have some question and answer period available at the very end of the presentation if you do have something that you want answered. Let's get going. Okay, so the My Chicago River Day Summer Challenge was an adaptation of our Chicago River Day event, which was a big cleanup that we've held every year since 1992. It was a way of getting people out into the watershed to improve the quality of the water and the aesthetic of the surrounding land. We weren't able to do that this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. And so we adapted and actually came up with the Summer Challenge. It's a series of presentations by some of the experts on our staff. You can see this is actually the last one of the series. The only thing after this is a kind of wrap up for the year and a sharing of the data of people that have gone out and actually done the Summer Challenge and picked up trash. But today on September 12th, we're going to be talking about combating climate change here in Illinois, on a global scale in Illinois, in Chicago, and in your home. We want to thank the many sponsors of our Chicago River Day 2020 Summer Challenge. They are of tremendous support, and we thank them tremendously for all of the support and money that they give us for this event. Today specifically, our featured sponsor is West Monroe. They've been a longtime sponsor of the Chicago River Day event, and we wish to thank them. If you still wish to participate in the My Chicago River Day Summer Challenge, we encourage you to go to our website, chicagoriver.org. You can actually sign a pledge your support of the Summer Challenge, and obtain information on how to get out and actually pick up trash on your own so that we're socially distanced and safe, reviewing safety guidelines. You can actually get buckets, grabbers, gloves, and masks. Go out on your own, pick up trash, take pictures, document what you find and what activities you did, and actually send them to us. You can post your photos on the map and tell us what you found, and promote the entire event through a couple of hashtags through social media at hashtag lose the litter and hashtag litter free Chicago River. So we thank you for that. Also at this time, I just wanted to let you know that you can become a member of Friends of the Chicago River. And right now, all membership donations are matched 3-to-1 by the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. You receive notifications, emails, e-news, also our written River Reporter, which is our newsletter, and all kinds of other really cool things. And invitation to our upcoming annual meeting that's going to be happening. So very, very, very good benefits. So turning our attention to the presentation for today, we're going to be talking about climate change and how to combat the climate crisis in your home and in your own life. And we'll get started. A little information on Friends of the Chicago River. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year in 2019. We have been in existence for 40 years, and our mission is to improve and protect the Chicago River system for people, plants, and animals. We work in 3 distinct program areas: education and outreach, which wants to increase awareness, attitude towards, and the willingness to take action for the river. Things like our Bridge House Museum, our paddling programs, Chicago River Schools Network. We have on-the-grounds projects that try to physically improve the river and water quality, such as the Centennial Volunteers, other volunteer programs, Chicago River Day, dam busting and other improvements like that, Crooked Creek, McClurry Springs. We also do public policy and planning efforts to improve the river in a systematic way, water quality standards, sewage standards, things like that. Also land use next to the river, trying to plan those things. And we did just award our the Blue Ribbon Awards, which are a way of kind of in promoting the public policy and planning efforts. So I wanted to start with a little bit of science on climate change and not just get into a lot of soapbox preaching and, you know, I don't want to make this all doom and gloom. I want to try to be kind of upbeat about this. So if everybody in the audience can kind of keep me on task there. But I wanted to talk about what some of the facts are on climate change and what's going on a global scale. And then we'll kind of zoom in on Illinois later. The first thing I'd like to just cover is climate change is not weather. Weather and climate are totally different ideas. When you look out the window, today it's raining, tomorrow it might be sunny. That's weather. Climate is the long-term average temperature, precipitation, other factors that go into weather, but it's those long-term averages, and we look at trends. That is climate. Climate is whether you're in a desert, low precipitation area, or a high precipitation like a rainforest, or some combination of those kinds of things. So I want to make that distinction. Earth's climate has always been changing. We obviously went through an ice age, you know, 10 to 12,000 years ago. It was much colder than today. It's been proven through ice core data and whatnot that during the time of the dinosaurs, it was much warmer. And so the Earth's climate is constantly changing. It's always in flux. What we're going to be talking about today is the anthropomorphic contribution of humans towards climate change. There has been a drastic change in climate because of human activity over the last 150 years or so. And that's what we're going to, that's climate change. That's how I'm defining that. It's a fact, on average, global air temperatures near the Earth's surface have gone up about 2 degrees in the last 100 years, and they're expected to rise even another degree over the next 50 years. So Earth's temperature is going up. What evidence is there? Well, glaciers across the globe have been retreating. I have some data here just to make sure I get it right. In the 1980s, we were losing an average of 9 inches per year from glaciers. In the 80s, it was 9 inches a year. 1990s, it was 17 inches per year. In the 2000s, 2.2 feet per year. And in the last decade, it's been about 3 feet per year. So the loss of glaciers across mountaintops across the globe has been increasing over the last 40 years. I believe every year consistently for 30 years, we have seen ice loss across the planet. Melting permafrost. There is a lot of frozen land in Canada, and Siberia, and Russia, and Northern Europe that is starting to melt. And that is a huge danger. About 2.5 million square miles, 40% of all the permafrost is predicted to be melted by the end of the century. And that is going to affect humans, cause refugees, make people move around. It's also, I didn't know this, but the permafrost actually is a huge carbon sink. So the permafrost melting releases carbon dioxide and methane back into the air, which exacerbates climate change. We'll talk about greenhouse gases here in a minute. Polar ice is disappearing. It's declining at a rate of about 13% right now per decade, relative to the average in like 1980. So we have seen a great loss of sea ice. Matter of fact, there was a news item about a month ago that a lot of the ice coverage on Greenland is gone, maybe permanently. Rising sea levels and flooding. Within a century, the land area flooded by the sea is supposed to increase by about 48%, and the population impacted by this rising sea level is expected to be about 287 million people living along the coast. Matter of fact, you read stories, you can look them up. The city of Miami is one of many that almost constantly has a threat. It's built so close to sea level that they have seawater actually coming into their freshwater drinking supplies. It comes up through the sewers in the street almost constantly. So this is something that we have to worry about. Just a couple more, and these will be in increasing frequency of storms, and this is something we see in the news all the time. Hurricanes seem to be getting stronger year after year. In 2017, a couple hurricanes that hit Texas caused $200 million in damage, or $200 billion in damage. I'd have to look that up. And of course, right now, the current story is the wildfires in California. In just California, there's an increased temperature of about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1980, and precipitation has dropped by 30%. So these hotter and drier conditions, along with lightning strikes and gender reveal parties and all kinds of other stuff, are causing these wildfires, and they're burning more and more land. As a matter of fact, we lost just 1 million acres in California just last week. And that's the most of any season ever. It's one that you don't often think about, changing flower and plant blooming times. Because we are warming up, plants tend to bloom about, let me get it right, a half a day, so about 12 hours per year earlier. And over the years, that means that some plants are blooming up to a month or 40 days ahead of where they used to. And that throws off insect populations, insect migration. Some plants don't get pollinated and insects will go hungry. So that's an effect of that. We're also going to see a rise of invasive pests as temperatures increase and get warmer. Africanized bees is one example, but mosquitoes are another. It used to be that we would get cold enough that it would knock back some of those pests. But in these days, they are starting to be here year round, and we're going to see more and more of them. What's the stat I had for that? Oh, alien insects alone are estimated to cost the global economy more than $70 billion a year. So these are big problems. And lastly, human life. Climate change is causing a lot of refugees. There's an estimated that 140 million migrants are going to be the result of climate change. And these are the things we've talked about: flooding, wildfires, loss of agricultural base, and people have to move, and that's causing 140 billion people by the end of the century, or by 2050. Okay, I hope that wasn't too doom and gloom. If we turn a little bit more to the science, what are the factors that impact global temperatures and climate change? Well, there are natural factors. As I said, the Earth's climate has always been changing. It's always been fluctuating up and down. And there are human impacts on climate change as well. So let's talk about some of those. The natural impacts on climate change. There are chemical compounds that are in our environment that are natural. There's water vapor. Obviously, the saturation of the atmosphere has peaked today, and it's actually raining. There's carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and there's methane, nitrous oxides. There's the ozone from the ozone layer, and others. These greenhouse gases, one of the things that they do, which is a benefit to us, is they actually help to trap some of the sun's energy and warm the Earth. It's why the surface of the Earth is a little bit warmer than space, because we're trapping the Earth's or the sun's energy in our atmosphere. And these gases help to do that. So where do they come from? Well, water vapor is in the atmosphere naturally. Depending on the climate and the location on the Earth, it's anywhere from 0 to 4% of the atmosphere. And if it gets to be over 4%, it tends to rain. Carbon dioxide is breathed out by animals and in by trees. Obviously, the trees breathe out oxygen, as do other plants. And that's the oxygen cycle, sharing oxygen, carbon dioxide. So that's where that is. And carbon dioxide is a significant portion of the atmosphere. Methane is a smaller proportion of the atmosphere, but it comes from decaying organic material, burning of fossil fuels and things like that. So that's where methane comes from. And those are all natural sources. This is what the Earth has done for millions of years. Human culture has come along and has kind of added to some of those things. The internal combustion engine releases carbon dioxide and some of those other greenhouse gases that we talked about. Agriculture, the cultivation of especially manure-producing animals like pigs and cows produces greenhouse gases, as does construction. Deforestation will obviously cut out the oxygen, therefore increasing the carbon dioxide, releasing carbon into the atmosphere, and industry. So deforestation, construction industry, factories, cars, all these things that we associate with human civilization, a lot of them produce greenhouse gases or burning of fossil fuels to release that into the atmosphere. And that's the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions that I was talking about, that we're talking about over the last 150 years or so. That's what we really need to worry about. So let's talk about each of these in turn really quickly. Water vapor, as I said, is anywhere from 0 to 4% of the atmosphere. Water vapor in the atmosphere tends to last about 10 days before it falls to Earth and then is replaced by evaporation. Its only limits are saturation in the atmosphere. And the human impact on water vapor is actually very small. We don't have very much of an effect on how much water vapor is in the air. Carbon dioxide. This one is more severe. Atmospheric concentration is low. For most of the 20th century, it was about 0.03%. Today, it's about 0.04%. Its lifetime is about 50 to 20 years, depending on the carbon cycle and how it gets incorporated into plant life. There are no limits to how much carbon dioxide you can put in the atmosphere, and the human impact on carbon dioxide is very large. Where there has been no change in the water vapor, carbon dioxide is up almost 50% since 1900. And just 31% of that since 1984. And most of that is from ice core data from Hawaii, ice core data from the polar regions, or also just directly measured from Hawaii in the atmosphere since about 1958. Methane, or CH4, is another important gas. It's actually a lot stronger than carbon dioxide in terms of its greenhouse effect. Its concentration is a lot lower though. Whereas carbon dioxide was in parts per million, this is 0.0001% or parts per billion. It's about 1,900 to 1,165 parts per billion in the 20th century. Since 1900, it's 11,000 or 1,165 parts per billion. Today, it's about 1,800 parts per billion. So it has gone up. It does have a shorter lifetime, but the human impact is large, again, mostly from agriculture. It's proportionate. It's up 55% since 1900, 11% since 1984. So it's similar to carbon dioxide. However, methane is 21 times more effective at trapping that sun's energy than carbon dioxide is. And we're going to talk about, well, one has a lot more and the other one's more powerful, so which one do we actually have to worry about? We'll talk about that next. So I hope this graphic makes sense. It's a very busy slide, but if you can imagine the image that you're looking at is 600 pixels by 800 pixels, imagine that is our entire atmosphere, is the screen. And that would be 480,000 molecules on the screen. Equate that to our atmosphere, just for a second. In 1900, water vapor would be about 19,000 of those pixels, or the yellow square. Carbon dioxide would be about 134 of those pixels, or its yellow square. Methane would be about a half a pixel, or that square right there, that little thing. The rest of it would be what is in our atmosphere, which is nitrogen, oxygen, things like that. In 2020, what is the change and which one of these should we worry about? Well, water vapor has not changed at all. It's still 4% or 19,200 pixels. Carbon dioxide, as I said, has gone up to 412 parts per million, about 197 pixels. Methane has doubled. It's gone from a half a pixel to 1 pixel. So although it is 21 times more efficient at trapping that heat, there is 197 times less of it than carbon dioxide. So if you weigh those things out, carbon dioxide is really the gas we need to worry about. Methane is important, but carbon dioxide is the one we really need to worry about. And so let's talk about carbon dioxide. Even back here, if you look at this image, what's going on? Well, the dinosaurs are breathing out carbon dioxide, and the plants and the trees are breathing it in. They're respiring it, so that they're giving off oxygen, and then the animals are actually breathing in oxygen. It's a cycle. And these things have constantly been changing, like I said. And so if you look at the carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, which we get from ice core data and things like that, over the last 400,000 years, it's gone between anywhere from 180 parts per million to about 300 parts per million. If you put the global temperatures up for that same period, they match. They're pretty close. And so there is definitely a causation or a link between how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere and what the Earth's global average surface temperature is. So should we worry about carbon dioxide? As I said, it's gone up, I think I said about 41% over the last 120 years or so. That is the black line that's on your graph. And global temperatures are in the blue and red bars. And as you can see, just over the last 120 years or so, 140 years, 30 of the highest global average temperatures are in the last 30 years. So there's a definite causation and a definite correlation between the two. Again, if we look at carbon dioxide, not over 400,000 years, but let's just look over the last 800,000 years. If it goes up and down, look at the carbon dioxide levels. It's only over 300 since about 1950. That's the peak. And we're talking, here was the Ice Age, here was the building of the pyramids, and there's a lot of human history condensed into this graph here. And all the carbon dioxide concentrations that are highest are just in the last 1/8 of an inch of the graph. So let's expand it out a little bit. Let's look at a little closer at just over the last 2,000 years. For historical reference, here's the writing of the Declaration of Independence. Here's the invention of the automobile, and carbon dioxide emissions shot up just over the last 1/2 inch or so, just over the last 100 years. And last one, if we zoom in just to the past 300 years, And for reference, here is the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement in 2016. And I just wanted to mention that if you look at the graph, there are only 3 countries that have not ratified or are withdrawing from the agreement. And they are, and we're in good company, the United States, Syria, and Nicaragua. So those are the countries that are not signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement about climate change. Indeed, climate change and the climate crisis is a global problem. Climate change is real. It's mostly caused by us, especially if you talk about the last 120 years or so. Climate change is already causing significant harm. This picture of the flooding of the Riverwalk, I believe, from last year. And it requires global action and local solutions. So we're going to turn our attention and talk a little bit more about Illinois and some of those local solutions. Because I wouldn't expect anybody to try to solve the entire global problem all on their own. We need to come together with our government and solve some of those problems. But there are things that we can do in our everyday lives, in our homes, to combat the climate crisis. And I wanted to talk about some of those. First, we'll talk about Illinois. If we look at temperature and precipitation trends here in the Midwest, Illinois is expected to see about a half a degree Fahrenheit rise in annual temperature. And we're also expected to see about an additional 3 inches of rain per year here in Illinois. So we're going to talk a lot about this, but hotter and wetter, and it's going to be seasonal. The good thing is, here in Chicago, we are buffered by our presence of being right next to Lake Michigan. There are a lot of other Midwestern towns, just to name a few, like St. Louis, Kansas City, Indianapolis, that are probably going to see a little bit more of an exacerbated change in their climate than Chicago will, because we are right next to the lake. It helps to kind of smooth out and soften some of those peaks and valleys in the temperature and precipitation. That's all I'm saying. So what do we mean by increased temperature? Well, by the end of the century, temperatures in Chicago are projected to rise anywhere from 7 to 13 degrees Fahrenheit in winter and 9 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. That's over the annual averages. We're talking about climate, not weather. So if you look at the trend, if you look at the average per year, they go up and down depending on whether it's winter or summer. That's the blue line, but the annual average is the red line. And there's no mistaking that the higher end of that graph is the right end. So since 2000, we've seen some of our hottest temperatures on average here in Illinois. And just as a pure statistic, the number of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit in Chicago is expected to double or even triple to 40 or more per summer by the end of the year 2000 or 2100, by the end of the century. And if you think of it just in terms of an anecdotal story, think of the climate of Texas right now. That's what our climate is expected to be like by the end of the century, at least in terms of temperature. Go back. Okay. Sorry, I thought I didn't know I had one more graph. The other thing was this is similar to the chart we saw before. If you look at the last 140 years or so, what are the 20 hottest and 20 coldest years in terms of average temperature? You can see all of the 20 hottest average years are in the last, what is that, like 22 years. So we are definitely trending warmer and hotter. The other end of this was variable precipitation. Overall annual precipitation is likely to increase by about 5%, down in the summer by 5 to 20%, up in the winter by 10 to 25%. So it's expected to increase a little bit overall, but we're actually going to see drier summers and wetter winters. And that is again shown, the seasonal precipitation varies, that's the blue line, but the annual average is the green line, and that is trending upwards. River levels will be lower with more severe flooding. So on average, we're going to see a little bit lower river levels, but if it does flood, it's going to be more severe, with flooding levels more than 50% higher than the average flood today. And I put up a chart, the average number of extreme precipitation events in Illinois, meaning greater than 2 inches. We've had, most of those are in just the last 15 years or so. So we're seeing increased flooding and increased severe flooding. All right, so we're really going to get hyper local now. We're going to just talk about the Chicago River and climate change and what kind of effects we're supposed to see and what we can do about it. As I said, we're expecting a hotter and wetter winter. What would be the impact on the Chicago River, potential impacts? Well, we'll probably see more flooding in the winter, which will create more erosion along the banks, more soil getting into the river. Invasive pests will be more pervasive. If it's hotter and wetter, a lot of bugs like those kinds of conditions. And so we're going to see more termites and ants and things like that, and invasive species as well. And soils will become saturated, and which will actually change some of the ecosystems from being, there might be places where it was a prairie and now it's more of a mesic prairie or a wet prairie. More flooding and more erosion will increase property damage and cost more in terms of repair and recovery from flooding. More runoff will cause additional beach closings and things like that, exacerbate infrastructure along the river, and increase vector and waterborne diseases with more water around. And saturated soil could cause crop loss and affect, a lot of the economy here in Illinois is based in agriculture. And if we have crop loss and decreased soil fertility, that really could affect that. So let's talk about summer. Whereas winter is going to be hotter and wetter, summer is going to be hotter and drier, which could cause drought, decreased soil moisture in some places, less aquatic habitat in upland areas, loss of groundwater, lower river and lake levels, which we've actually seen since we dug the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. The level of the river has actually dropped in relation to that of the lake. We've seen a big change there. And we'll also see increased combined sewer overflows and non-point source pollution, which will cause crop vulnerability. Again, Illinois has an agrarian society, agrarian economy that could really affect that. We could see more water conflicts, much like they have out west. There's a lot less water out in the United States western states, and they quite often have water disputes in terms of accessing water for agriculture and other reasons. So we could see some of that. We're very blessed that we have a lot of water here in Illinois. That could change. Decreased soil moisture could create a decline of native species along with the increase in invasive species. Could lose biodiversity and actually cause infrastructure changes where we actually have changing water levels and erosion. We might actually have to rebuild structures and account for some of that erosion and climate change. And that'll cost a lot of money. Not as bad as Miami. Miami might have to relocate entirely. Chicago is not at that level, at least yet. To kind of sum up, if we have lower river levels That's going to cause drought and less aquatic habitat for animals. Increased severe flooding, the river is going to go up and down, and flash floods will be worse, which will bring in trash and other things. Specifically here in Chicago, we have an influx of sewage water whenever we have flooding. I will mention right now that Friends of the Chicago River has an overflow action day. So when the river overflows like this and carries pollution and sewage, we have a system for notifications so that people can find out when there's an overflow action day event going on. All you have to do is go to chicagoriver.org or just Google overflow action, and it should take you there. There's a pledge you can sign. You can actually sign up for alerts if you enjoy getting a notification when the Chicago River is going to flood and potentially have sewage in it. That is a great thing to find out. The other thing is a loss of biodiversity with drought and the severe flooding. That could cause a decline in native species, and non-native species could increase. So after all of that, hopefully everybody is still awake and not totally in despair from all of this. But what can we do about climate change? I want to give you just a few ideas of things that you can do in your everyday life to combat climate change. And not saying that you have to do these, but these are options. You don't have to do all of them. If you did just one of them, a little change in behavior, it would make a big impact, especially if everybody did it. The first one, we need to think like scientists and make thoughtful, intelligent choices and take responsibility for our own learning about climate change. Speak to others. Use words that build others up, not tear them down, and use clear, powerful language to express ourselves about climate change. And we should investigate. We should be skeptical of what some people say about climate. It is real, and we should definitely ask questions and constantly seek out authorized sources for understanding and knowledge. So how can you stop climate change? Well, plant a tree. Properly placed trees can cut energy bills by up to $250 a year by, again, shading homes, trapping moisture, humidity, and always use native plants when you plant a tree. So never pick an invasive tree and plant it in your yard, but plant a native tree. What does it say there? It cools the environment, provides habitat, and it stores carbon as well, which is a good thing. We're losing a lot of the forests across the globe, so plant a tree. This is an easy one. Unplug all of your devices when you're at home, when you're not using them. I don't know if you knew this, but when you have a phone charger or some other kind of charger plugged into the wall, if it's not being used, it's still draining power. And power comes from usually electricity that's generated through fossil fuel consumption or water power. So electricity does have links to air pollution and water pollution. So if we can use less energy, we'll be saving the water. This is a little tougher one. Walk, ride a bike, or take the train instead of driving a car. Essentially, you want to reduce your carbon footprint. And there are a lot of carbon footprint calculators online. But try to choose a mode of transportation that uses less carbon, like walking or riding a bike. And not saying you can't fly a plane, but just maybe pick and choose when you do so. Take a shorter shower. Just having a 5-minute shorter shower saves 12 gallons of water. And as I said before, if you're saving water, you're actually saving energy and the energy that it took to clean and produce that water. So using less water saves water. It also saves energy, which cleans additional water. You can stop climate change by using natural cleaners. Try to clean your home just using natural cleaners, like the 7th generation cleaners you can get from the store, or just use a combination of vinegar and lemon juice. There actually are a lot of good, not organic, but environmentally friendly recipes online for cleaners and things like that. So you try to use some of those. Again, you don't have to use them everywhere, but just start with something. Go organic. This one always takes a lot of people by surprise. If you go organic, you're actually helping to increase biodiversity and reduce carbon. A lot of the foods and other products that we use are, they use caustic chemicals to produce them. And so if we can go organic, we're reducing our use of petroleum-based fertilizers and absorbing carbon dioxide from the air. Organic agriculture using natural fertilizers helps reduce our carbon footprint as well. Organic wine, organic fabrics, things like that, they do help quite a bit. Oh, and thank you, Margaret. You can install a rain barrel. This is a common theme with saving water. If we allow water to just run off of our roofs and go right into the river, it will be a flooding situation, flash flooding. If we can reduce the time that it takes that water to get to the river, we'll spread that out and it won't be as exacerbated. Water pollution will be decreased, and we'll be able to save the water. As a matter of fact, if you ever water your lawn, it's probably better to save that water from your roof and use that rather than use basically potable, clean drinking water from your hose. That would be much better for the environment. And how can you stop climate change? Just get out there and volunteer. There are so many programs that help pick up litter or stop overflow action or overflow of the river, strengthening biodiversity, planting native plants. There are so many things that you can do. Projects that Friends actually runs, you can get out and volunteer with Centennial Volunteers and plant native trees and decrease invasives. You can volunteer at some of our many events that, you know, Chicago River Day, picking up trash and litter and getting plastic out of the river. Those things help quite a bit. So just one last thank you to West Monroe for helping to sponsor this program today. I want to thank everybody for being here.